Texas is very grateful to have both financial and leadership support from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to address the problem of impaired driving in our state. Georgia Chakiris, which is also a great friend, that's a longtime friend, is the administrator of NHTSA's Region 6, a position she has held for more than 20 years. Her service area not only includes Texas, but also New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Indian Nation, but I know Texas is her favorite. So, Georgia is here this morning to talk about impaired driving from a NHTSA perspective. Please welcome Georgia.
Thank you, Carol, and the Texas Department of Transportation for involving the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I am really grateful to be able to be here today at the Impaired Driving Summit. It is an issue that is very serious across the country, very serious in Texas. Impaired driving is one of the most often committed dangerous crimes in America. Having an Impaired Driving Summit, which I think is aptly named, when you look at the dictionary that says a summit is a gathering of leaders, of governments, and an effort to attain the highest levels possible. That's what I see when I look across this room, the talent, the experience, the knowledge, and the commitment and passion. I have already been inspired this morning by listening to Deputy Director Barton and Chief McManus. All of the wealth of information is here in the partnerships that we gather together in. So what I have to say really just adds to the information and the reasons for our commitment and how we're going to use that commitment to turn it into the possibilities that a summit can inspire. I also look at this as pretty personal. I live here in Texas, so while I'm charged with an entire region, I live here, my family is raised here. It is important to me to keep the streets safe in the state of Texas, as I know it is for all of you. We have been able to make a difference, and when I came here, over 25 years ago, to this region, I had the opportunity to be involved in a summit very similar to this, where I met a woman who was a mother of 3 daughters, who told me her story of loss because of an impaired driver. And my heart went out to her because she lost 3 daughters, and I couldn't imagine the grief of that horrific crash. But as she told her story, I learned that her daughters were killed in 3 separate impaired driving crashes. And I was incensed that impaired driving could be so often committed that a woman would have to endure that kind of loss. But I was also a little scared that we would have impaired driving that prevalent, that it could happen to us, to our families and our children. Now, in the past 25 years, we have made a lot of difference. Let's see if I get that one. On the national level, and I think if any of you have been to conferences, you've seen this as NHTSA's backdrop for our exhibit. But I do think it's important to visit about where we were many years ago. And at the top level, we lost 54,000 people each year. And we have reduced that number to 32,000. And while that still is a terrible number, we have been able to make a difference. So we have learned some things about what works. And this, a big part of that overall drop in fatalities is a drop in impaired driving fatalities. Because as that has dropped, impaired driving fatalities have also dropped. And if you look, and I don't know whether this light will point, when you get to the 2007 line, you start to see a little sharper drop where we really are making some advances. And as we get towards the bottom, it gets harder. We have to not just work harder, we have to work smarter. We have to really look at those things that we have learned that work. When you look at the region as the country as a whole, and you look at our region, we do see, unfortunately, while we've had some advances, that in 2012, we had quite a blip, and we went up 10 percentage points. But if you look across the country, you do see regions that are having success. And in the next year, we have been able to level out from that little blip going up. And you see a number of regions who are going down. So there are places where they're finding what makes a difference. This is just a chart of the numbers of experience that we have seen from 2007, and as you can tell, we have had some big decreases in this region. Some of our states overall have seen some big decreases, and as a region as a whole, we have reduced over 11 percentage points. But if you'll notice, and I can't get here, nationally, the percentage reduction is greater. So we aren't getting ahead of the game. And so our stance as the leading region in the impaired driving problem continues. And while it's important what's happening here, I think it's equally important for us to know how we rank up to the rest of the country so that we can learn from them. Part of what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration does is to collect best practices across the country, because the work that happens at the local levels and at the state levels. And there have been a lot of programs here in Texas that have been very successful. But we have also had some states that have shown huge decreases by implementing the leadership model. And that means high visibility, loud action leadership at all levels, not just at the state, but at the local leaders, individuals like Chief McManus, who will speak up to the public about the changes that need to be done. We have had some culture changes over the years. It is now socially unacceptable to be arrested for drunk driving. However, in some areas, in some populations here in Texas, it's not socially unacceptable to get away with it. We need to change that culture. And part of that is using the data to identify the specifics of the problem and who's engaged in them, and also to use evidence-based strategies. That's something that the Texas Department of Transportation and your Highway Safety Office is leading. Part of the requirements of the most recent authorization that Congress has provided to us requires that grant programs go to evidence-based projects and strategies, that we're using the data to show what works and what doesn't work. Place our money and our efforts. That means we need to work together to identify strategies that allocate those programs based on the data and that we identify strategies that are going to be most effective in addressing the issues in our state and in our local levels. That's where all of you come in. The data that's collected by law enforcement officers is critical to what we do. It is critical to evaluating the programs and strategies that are developed. So it's not just a bureaucratic thing, oh, I have to fill out another form. It is something that is very, very important to the planning process of what we're going to be doing here as part of an Impaired Driving Summit. We're looking at the data and what it means. And what we're finding is that programs, high visibility enforcement is probably one of our most effective tools that we have available. Having officers who are highly trained for the purposes SFST and DRE. And those are efforts that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration are going to continue to support and relying on for many of our programs, particularly our national mobilizations and crackdowns. Law enforcement needs to be highly visible. We need to tell the people about the programs that we are doing. It's not just arresting people, it's not just providing them a ticket, it is deterring them from that action to start with. Impaired driving is a choice. We need to help them make the right choice with that. But enforcement is the linchpin for many other programs in the impaired driving area. It has to be comprehensive. And I know you've heard before, there is no silver bullet. Well, there isn't. With only enforcement, we can do so much. We need to have the full picture. We need to have the support. We need to have work on countermeasures that continue to deter the programs, but include programs like the no refusal program that Chief McManus mentioned. It's not just that it helps to increase conviction, it's the deterrence value that comes from that. Using ignition interlocks and all the technology that's going to be coming and available to us, programs that are important to implement. In many cases, we need to have that visible support from everyone in order to get the laws that are needed to support that. And having ignition interlocks, something that's addressed for all offenders, not just some, can make a big difference. My hope is that technology will carry us even further when we can put those types of interlocks into the new vehicles when they are manufactured. And what a difference will that make? Huge gains, but that's probably 20 years down the road. So we have lots of work to do in the meantime. We need to be looking at what we can do to help improve the monitoring and the control and the treatment of those individuals who have been identified as offenders so we can stop the revolving doors. And ignition interlocks is the start of that program. I did want to mention, as you saw here, we have a document that's called Countermeasures That Work. And you can go online at any time and look at the 7th edition, which is the most recent one. Not everything is in there, but it does give you a good overview of programs that work. Some cost more than others. Some are easily implementable. Some have more long-term impact, some are more short impact. But this is a document that's important for you to review and see what part of the pie you are. You're focusing on enforcement, or you're focusing on adjudication, or you're focusing on treatment. You're part of a full picture that needs to be developed into a statewide strategic plan. I commend all of you for being here because I know the fact that you're here means you have a commitment to doing something about the impaired driving problem here in Texas. And so true is the statement, as Texas goes, so goes the nation and so goes the region. Your numbers are enough here that it really makes a difference in our continued progress at the national level, and especially here in the region. Your leadership and the leadership of your Highway Safety Office, I can't say enough thank yous to Carol and to Terry Pence, and to John Barton for your leadership and efforts in addressing an extremely difficult problem here in Texas. You have challenges a lot of other states don't have. The size of this state is like a country. The culture differences from north, south, east, and west are very different. You have multiple media markets, so when you have a horrific crash in one part of the state, not everybody hears about it. So you don't get the overall feel for the problems that Texas faces. And that over 1,000 people die each year in this state due to impaired drivers. We need to make sure that the public hears that. I had a longtime friend who was very fond of saying, we have the level of the problem we are willing to accept. We need to stand up and say we're not willing to accept this. I would be remiss if I didn't say something about the upcoming impaired driving crackdown that's coming up, and that this is a good opportunity for us all to stand up, not just enforcement who put their lives on the line to be out there on our highways, but those of us who can endorse that enforcement as something we want, something that's important to us. So I hope that after leaving here, you can look at what your role can be in supporting the national drive sober or get pulled over crackdown for impaired driving over the holidays, one of the most difficult times for addressing impaired driving. In addition to that, I would like to also make a pitch for the importance of seatbelt use, and that while we're going to be focusing on impaired driving here, your best protection against the drunk driver has always been buckling up. And while we have been blessed to reach over 90% seatbelt usage here in the state of Texas, congratulations to everyone who's worked hard on that, nighttime belt use is much lower. And that's when our streets and our highways are more dangerous, lighting is more difficult, and we have more impaired drivers on the road. We need to do what we can to look at nighttime seatbelt enforcement and send that message to the public that they need to buckle up every day, all day, day or night. So thank you very much for your attention. I am so pleased to be here.